The texture operator within the texture projection has some interesting properties when interacting with your mesh history. So here we have a grid with a texture projection on here. So let's go ahead and open up our texture editor and change this view to textured display mode. So one of the interesting and normal behaviors that you'll have on a mesh that has UVs on it is when you move your points, you're going to see that your texture is going to stick, so to speak, on those points. This has to do with the UVs not really manipulating and kind of sticking in place when you manipulate your points. If we were to go ahead and have the texture operator, or actually let's go ahead and just hover over this real quick. You can see texture projection operator reading just above geometry. So whenever you generate your texture projection, the texture operator is going to evaluate, or it's going to read just above the last operator in your modeling stack. So the texture operator here is reading just above the geometry operator here. So if I were to go ahead and change any of these numbers here, you're gonna see we're gonna get kind of a swimming effect where the texture isn't really sticking to any of the points. And the reason this is happening is this isn't taking this operator is after the geometry operator. So if I were to undo this and do, let's see, a twist operator perhaps, so we can see this more or less in action. So if we, again, if we hover over this texture operator here, it's reading just above the geometry. If I were to do a deformer, let's say a twist deformer, let's try this on our object in object mode, twist. You can see that the texture went along and began to move with the object. So if I were to duplicate this here, just bring it over so they both have their projection, and let's frame this, open up the active primitive, clusters, bam, boom. So here we have our texture operator here, and if we hover over this object, we're going to see it's reading just above geometry. Now if we look over here, we have our geometry, the texture operator is reading just above it, and the twist operator is happening afterwards. Now if you remember what I did before, if I went to the geometry tab here and played around with my topology, so if I added subdivisions, or let me not add subdivisions, let me change the size. So as I change the size, you can see we're getting kind of the texture swim effect. So if I were to have this texture operator read after the twist op, we're going to get something similar where the twist operator is going to happen before the evaluation of the texture operator. So if I were to grab this guy and just bring it above here and hover my cursor over the texture op, it says texture projection operator reading just above twist operator. So if we select our object, you can see that we're getting that twisting or that swimming effect again here. So if we were to manipulate this operator, you're going to see that the UVs really aren't sticking to the geometry. So in this instance, it doesn't look like it's a real desired behavior. So let's show you a useful example where this may be a desired effect. So if we go back to this guy here, and you can see that since the texture operator is evaluating before the twist operator, we can go ahead and you can see that the texture is sticking to it. So let's actually delete the twist operator. Keep this here. Let's make sure our headlight's on. It is. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab an image here and show you a practical use of this swimming and sticking effect. So if we were to go open up our net view, go inside Google, and in this case let's grab let's see, storefront. Let's see if we can find anything with this storefront images. Alright, Okay, this isn't too bad. So let's grab this image and just drop it onto our grid here. Let's overwrite that. Cool. So here we have our geometry here with a texture on it, and in this case I'm going to use this texture as a reference to model. So if I go ahead and let's say I see this loop here and I want to take this loop and add it and move it over to this edge for this for the end of this guy here, or if I grab the loop that's right next to it, that probably would be better. So if I were to grab this and move it, you can see that I'm not able to slide this edge onto the edge of the reference here. So if I want to try to do that, let's see if I try that again. If I were to grab this, kind of slide it over a little bit and hover over this guy, you're going to see that it should be reading just above the geometry, and it is. So if I were to take my texture operator and drop it above my move component, you're going to see that this move is now you can see that the edge now moved more or less where I would want to do, where I would want to position it. And the texture remained the same. So that's a pretty useful behavior, but going back and forth isn't really that productive. So what we can do, we can utilize our different construction modes. So if we were to take our texture operator and put it in a different construction history stack, no matter what's going to happen within the modeling stack, the texture operator will evaluate afterwards. So if we hover over the texture op, saying a reading just above modeling, which is here. So now if I were to go ahead and grab these edges, you can see I can move these around all day, and I can add geometry, and it's going to work. So that's pretty useful. I can delete geometry. So in this case, if I wanted to get rid of these guys, I can do so, and I wouldn't have to worry. So let's get rid of that. Let's say I don't want any geo here. Pook, pook. Let's grab these guys here and slide it. And then I'm looking here, I probably want some more loops. Let's say I wanted to get this detail, so I can hit Shift D, bring this up a little bit, and it just happened to match there. So if I were to grab these guys, Alt right mouse button click, let's do a bevel. So the bevel's here, and then I could Alt right mouse button click, select adjacent polygons. See how well that will work. Not very well. So let's just grab these guys, and then I could extrude and then have a good time with this. So extrude, and then let's just pull this out, and you can see that having the texture operator read above the modeling stack is allowing me to use the image plane as my reference itself. So it's a pretty useful technique, and there are easy ways to access this. I showed you how it worked in the back end, but there's actually a function within the rendering menu set, 3 on your 3, or if you come over here and hit and grab render, it's under the projection tab, and the operations are called swim and stick. So if I actually want to have the normal behavior of the sticking of my UVs, I can go ahead, you can see that we're getting the swimming. If I want it to stick, I just grab my texture operator and just drop it on top of the last operator here. So it's not gonna work. Oh, it actually worked in that case. So there we go. Usually you have to make sure you put it on top, or else you're going to get an error. So if I were to drag this over here, it actually didn't read as an error. That's interesting. Usually I find that if I try to bring my texture operator to a lower level node, or above all this history, I usually get an error that's going to read something along the lines of the evaluation may not produce predictable results. So you're not able to do it. But in this case, it looks like I'm able to. So let's just go ahead, bring it to the top so we can get a predictable behavior. There we go. So now if I were to go back here and then move these guys, you're going to see that we get our sticking again, and it's behaving like normal. So that behavior that I was telling you about with the buttons over here, if you select your projection and go to projection swim, it's actually going to bring it up into the secondary shape modeling stack. So if I hover over here, it's going to, oh, where's my texture op? Let's get the texture op. There we go. Hover over the texture op. Let's see. See, it's reading just above secondary shape modeling. So now, just with that one operation, I'm able to get my texture swimming. If I wanted to stick again, I can go ahead, make sure you have my your active projection that you want to use, then go to projection stick. So now it's sticking again. So that texture swimming and texture sticking is pretty useful. Just one thing to note, you lose your texture operator if you have explicit UVs or if you freeze your texture projection. So if you were to select your projection and hit freeze, you're not able to do your swimming anymore since your texture operator is no longer in effect. So if we were to try that texture swim again, projection swim, you're going to get an error, and you're not going to get any sticking. So this works with the clean projection where you have your texture support and your texture operator in place. So that is the behavior of your texture operator with your construction modes.